rock and roll singer Rick Nelson was killed last night in a private plane crash in Texas.
December 31st, 1985. As the world counted down to midnight, a tragic crash in a Texas field silenced one of rock and roll's original icons. Ricky Nelson, the clean-cut teen idol turned music legend, was gone. But in the aftermath of heartbreak was another story entirely. A fortune so massive, it raised more questions than answers. Was it an accident? And who walked away with Ricky Nelson's hidden millions? At the time of his death, headlines painted Ricky Nelson as a fallen star, washed up, broke, and buried under the weight of a messy divorce and a fading career. The world believed he had died with little more than memories of his former glory. But in the years that followed, a very different truth began to surface, one of hidden royalties, overlooked contracts, and a massive fortune tied up in legal red tape. Far from being broke, Ricky Nelson had unknowingly built a posthumous financial empire. Behind the scenes, music rights from his early hits and even newer digital streams sparked million-dollar lawsuits, raising one big question: were his contracts built to last in the digital age? And if not, who was cashing in? This wasn't just about a rock icon's death. It was about the battle for a legacy, the fight for royalties, and the unexpected riches left behind by a man many thought had nothing. So, how much was Ricky Nelson really worth? Who's still profiting from his music today? And how did his family end up with a fortune that shocked even industry insiders? The early empire. Ricky Nelson wasn't just a singer. He was a full-blown TV star who practically grew up in front of the camera. Born into a famous entertainment family, Ricky became a household name thanks to the hit show, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. He joined the show in 1949 when he was just 8 years old, and it quickly became one of the longest-running sitcoms in American TV history. Millions of viewers watched him grow up on screen, and his charm, good looks, and natural talent made him one of the most beloved young stars of his time. But what many people don't realize is just how much money Ricky was making even as a kid. By the age of 13, he was already earning more than $100,000 a year, a huge amount, especially back then. His earnings kept rising, and by the time he turned 16, Ricky had built up a personal fortune of $500,000. That kind of money was rare for a teenager in the 1950s. To understand just how impressive that is, if you adjusted that amount for inflation, it would be worth over $6 million in today's money. That means Ricky Nelson was a millionaire in today's terms before he even graduated high school. His early success wasn't just about fame. It also gave him serious financial power. Long before he topped the music charts, Ricky was already living the kind of life most people only dream of, proving that his journey to superstardom began long before he ever sang a note on stage. Ricky Nelson's early financial success didn't happen by chance, though. It was carefully planned by his father, Ozzie Nelson. Ozzie, who was not only a former bandleader but also a smart businessman, had a brilliant idea. He started featuring Ricky's music performances in episodes of their hit TV show, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. This was a genius move. At a time when most artists had to rely on radio or live shows to promote their songs, Ricky was performing in millions of living rooms across America every week. In many ways, Ozzie turned the TV show into one big music commercial, with Ricky as the star. This creative mix of television and music promotion was way ahead of its time. It worked so well that in 1957, Ricky landed a 5-year record deal with Imperial Records, and it wasn't just any deal. Most young artists back then had little to no control over their music careers, but Ozzie made sure Ricky had something different. The contract gave them the power to choose which songs Ricky recorded, decide how the album covers looked, and even have a say in how the music was produced. That kind of control was almost unheard of, especially for someone so young. It was a groundbreaking deal, and it laid the foundation for Ricky's future success. And succeed, he did. Ricky's first single, Bebop Baby, was a massive hit even before it was released. It got 750 advance orders and went on to sell over 1 million copies. His debut album, simply titled Ricky, quickly shot to #1 on the charts, cementing his place as a rising music star. By the time he turned 21, Ricky had already earned 9 gold records, a rare achievement for any artist, let alone someone still so young. One of his biggest hits, Travelin' Man, sold over 2 million copies and reached #1 in 32 countries around the world. Another major hit, Poor Little Fool, made music history as the first ever #1 song on Billboard's newly launched Hot 100 chart. And it too sold over 2 million copies. This period of Ricky's career wasn't just about chart-topping hits. It was about setting new standards for how music could be marketed, sold, and experienced. With his father's guidance and his own natural talent, Ricky Nelson became one of the first true crossover stars, blending TV fame with music success in a way that paved the path for future generations of artists. He wasn't just a teen idol, he was a trendsetter who helped shape the modern music industry. But behind the gold records and global fame was a lesser-known truth. While Ricky was earning like a superstar, he was living with the restrictions of a teenager. Despite the millions he brought in, the money wasn't really his to use. Even though Ricky Nelson was earning huge amounts of money as a young star, he didn't have much control over it, and, in fact, he barely had access to it at all. Most of Ricky's wealth was managed by his parents, especially through trusts that were set up to protect his money while he was still growing up. On paper, he was incredibly rich. But in real life, it didn't always feel that way to him. Even when he turned 18, Ricky was reportedly only given a $50 allowance, which wasn't much, especially considering how famous and successful he was. Things were so tight that at one point, Ricky had to collect empty soda bottles just to scrape together enough money to take a girl out to the movies. Imagine that. One of the biggest teen idols in the country, whose songs were topping the charts, having to scrounge for pocket change like an ordinary kid. It's a surprising and sad contrast. While his parents may have had good intentions, trying to keep his money safe from being mismanaged too young, the strict control over his finances created long-term problems. Ricky's money was tied up in ways that made it hard for him to use, even when he was an adult. This tight grip likely added to the stress and financial challenges he faced later in life, especially after his expensive divorce and during his efforts to keep his career afloat. These early financial restrictions also planted the seeds for future legal battles within his estate. The way his money had been handled, saved, or limited became a point of tension and confusion after his death. It helps explain why, despite making millions in his youth, people believed he had died broke. In reality, the money wasn't always gone. It was often out of reach, and that complicated relationship with his own fortune followed him for the rest of his life, and even after his passing, playing a big role in the legal battles that would later unfold. As Ricky tried to navigate adulthood, fame, and financial frustration, the spotlight began to shift. His music evolved, his acting career took unexpected turns, and the money, just like his public image, became harder to hold on to. The shifting spotlight, music, movies, and money in flux. As the 1960s dawned, Ricky Nelson actively sought to evolve beyond his clean-cut teen idol image. He continued to release music, exploring new sounds, notably venturing into country rock. Simultaneously, he pursued acting roles, aiming to broaden his artistic scope beyond the confines of the television sitcom that had made him famous. His career, marked by continuous creative output, served as a dynamic soundtrack, reflecting the ever-changing landscape of American popular culture. One of his most significant forays into Hollywood was his role in the 1959 Western classic, Rio Bravo. Co-starring alongside cinematic giants John Wayne and Dean Martin, Nelson's presence in the film was a considerable draw. The film's director, Howard Hawks, later acknowledged that simply adding Nelson's name to the movie poster boosted the box office performance by at least $2 million. This demonstrated his continued commercial appeal and star power extended far beyond his musical endeavors. The music industry itself was a dynamic and often turbulent beast throughout the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. The 1950s saw a proliferation of independent labels and the emergence of aggressive, sometimes illicit, promotional tactics like payola, bribing radio announcers, and even record companies purchasing their own records to artificially inflate sales figures. By the 60s, the industry experienced a global expansion, driven by declining international trade barriers and increasing consumer spending power. This period also saw major labels acquiring smaller independents, leading to a significant consolidation of power within the industry. The 1970s marked a shift, with a growing demand for domestic music products, but also the beginnings of a plateau in recorded music sales after 3 uninterrupted decades of expansion. In this analog era, the nuances of music royalties were fundamentally different from today. Royalties were primarily tied to the sale of physical records and sheet music. Performance royalties gained significant importance with the widespread adoption of radio and television, managed by performing rights organizations such as ASCAP and BMI. Mechanical royalties were paid for the reproduction and distribution of physical copies like vinyl records and later cassette tapes. However, the contractual frameworks of this period, including Nelson's current compensation agreement from 1976 with CBS Records, which was later acquired by Sony, were inherently not designed to account for future digital distribution methods like streaming. This disconnect between the contractual language of the analog era and the realities of the digital age would become the very foundation of the multi-million-dollar royalty lawsuits that would emerge decades later. Despite his enduring fame and consistent output, touring was a demanding and often financially precarious grind for Ricky Nelson. While he could command between $7,500 and $10,000 per night on weekends after accounting for the substantial expenses of touring with a band and crew, he might only clear half of that amount. Weeknight gigs frequently barely broke even. While Ricky Nelson achieved considerable success in both music and film, generating millions of dollars from hit singles and box office contributions, the underlying economics of the music industry were in constant flux. The gradual shift from physical sales to later digital formats, coupled with the increasing consolidation of power by major labels, meant that even established artists faced challenges in maintaining consistent, high-level income. His concert earnings, though appearing substantial on paper, were significantly eroded by touring expenses. This dynamic helps explain why a star with such early and widespread success could later face financial difficulties, contributing to the public's perception of his financial decline. The contracts Ricky Nelson signed, even a relatively recent one from 1976, were naturally drafted for the prevailing music distribution methods of their time, primarily physical records and radio airplay. The very concept of digital downloads and streaming was unimaginable when these agreements were penned. This disconnect between the contractual language of the analog era and the eventual realities of the digital age would become the basis for the multi-million-dollar royalty lawsuits that would unfold decades later. The High Life, Hard Times, and the DC-3 Dream. Despite his continued work in music and acting, The financial realities of Ricky Nelson's adult life were a departure from the golden image of his youth. He and his wife, Kristen, maintained an undeniably extravagant lifestyle, characterized by expensive vacations, luxury sports cars, and extensive renovations to their homes. Neither possessed a strong financial acumen, often relying on business managers to handle their numerous purchases and expenditures. This pattern of spending, coupled with a lack of direct financial oversight, contributed to mounting pressures. The financial strain intensified dramatically with his contentious divorce from Kristen Nelson. Initiated in 1977 and finally concluded in December 1982, the divorce was financially devastating for Ricky. Kristen sought alimony, custody of their 4 children, and a significant portion of their community property. The proceedings were acrimonious, marked by mutual accusations of alcohol abuse and poor parenting. Ultimately, the legal and accounting fees alone cost Rick over $1 million, leaving him almost broke. He was also legally obligated to pay monthly spousal support and cover significant family expenses such as property taxes, medical bills, and school tuition, further draining his already depleted resources. Amidst their marital troubles, in April 1980, Rick and Kristen purchased the sprawling Errol Flynn estate on Mulholland Drive for $750,000. This iconic property, with its storied past, including secret passageways and a notorious history, became their home. While a symbol of their high-profile lifestyle, it also represented the substantial costs associated with maintaining such an extravagant residence. The house itself would later be torn down and its acreage subdivided. By 1985, the financial pressures on Rick were acute. He was in dire need of generating quick cash. A new record contract with MCA Curb Records was secured, and his agent booked an aggressive touring schedule, requiring Nelson to be on the road an average of 250 nights per year. This relentless pace showed his urgent need for income. To facilitate this demanding tour schedule, Nelson, who reportedly dreaded flying but adamantly refused to travel by bus, made a pivotal decision. He would acquire a private plane. In May 1985, he paid $118,000 for a 14-seat 1944 Douglas DC-3. This particular aircraft had a storied, if somewhat problematic, past, having once belonged to the DuPont family and later to fellow rock and roll legend Jerry Lee Lewis. However, the DC-3, registered as N711W, was a constant source of mechanical trouble from the moment Nelson took ownership. Incidents included his band being forced to physically push the plane off a runway after an engine failed, and a malfunctioning ignition magneto, preventing him from participating in the inaugural Farm Aid concert. Pilots and band members alike expressed serious concerns about its airworthiness. To make matters worse, Nelson, under growing financial strain, chose to cut corners on transportation, opting for a vintage propeller-driven Warbird instead of investing in a safer modern jet. The aircraft had a history of mechanical issues, yet the decision was driven by one harsh reality: he needed to save money. Desperate to stay afloat, Ricky committed to a grueling tour schedule and placed his trust in a troubled plane to get him there. In the end, that cost-saving move, born out of urgency to make cash fast, led to the crash that took his life. The aftermath: will and family. The plane crash on New Year's Eve, 1985, plunged Ricky Nelson's family and the entire music world into immediate grief and chaos. Amidst the profound tragedy, the initial public perception that quickly took hold was that Ricky Nelson had left behind little more than debt. This belief was fueled by his well-known financial struggles leading up to his death. Just weeks after his untimely demise, on January 17, 1986, the details of Ricky Nelson's will dated August 22, 1985, were made public. The will revealed his clear intention. He left his entire estate to his 4 children from his marriage: Tracy, Matthew, Gunnar, and his then 11-year-old minor son, Sam. The document was notably explicit in its exclusions. Ricky specifically left nothing to his former wife, Kristen Nelson, his fiancée, Helen Blair, who tragically also died in the crash, or his mother, Harriet Nelson. He stated that his mother was well taken care of and comfortable. For Helen Blair, the will simply stated, "Those are our wishes," without further elaboration. He also explicitly disinherited Eric Crew, a man who claimed to be his out-of-wedlock son. The revelation of the will immediately ignited a battle for control of the estate. Ricky's ex-wife, Kristen, promptly applied to be the special administrator, claiming that no copy of the will could be found. However, Ricky's brother, David Nelson, swiftly submitted a copy to the court and was subsequently appointed special administrator by Judge Julius Leatham. Kristen's attempt to gain control of the estate and her threat to sue for life insurance money were ultimately rejected. Adding to the immediate turmoil and financial burden, Ricky Nelson's estate itself was quickly targeted by wrongful death lawsuits. Families of other passengers killed in the crash sought millions in damages, alleging that poor maintenance was the cause of the DC-3 crash. These legal challenges further reinforced the public perception that the estate was burdened by liabilities rather than possessing significant assets. Ricky Nelson's will revealed not just his financial plans, but the complicated nature of his personal life. He made it clear who he wanted to provide for and who he didn't. He left everything to his children, cutting out his ex-wife, his fiancée, and even his own mother. His decision to also exclude Eric Crew showed just how personal and intentional his choices were. Without that clarity, his estate could have ended up tied in even more painful and drawn-out battles. Right after his death, Ricky's estate faced a wave of lawsuits, and early court documents didn't even try to estimate its value. To the public, there was nothing left. But what looked like a financial mess at first was only part of the story. The real value of his estate, tied up in music rights, royalties, and long-term deals, took years to uncover. And as the music industry changed, especially with digital streaming, the fortune he left behind slowly came to light, shocking just about everyone. The unseen millions battling the music giants. For years after Ricky Nelson's death, his estate, first managed by his brother David, and later by a company called Nelson LLC, began to suspect that something wasn't right. They believed the record labels weren't being honest about how much money was really owed from Ricky's music. And they weren't alone. This kind of issue was common in the music industry. But in Ricky's case, the suspected missing money wasn't small. It was massive. The problem started with the contracts Ricky had signed back in the early days of his career. Those deals were written long before digital music ever existed, before iTunes, YouTube, or streaming platforms like Spotify. So when technology changed, the contracts didn't cover the new ways music was being sold and played. This left a lot of room for record companies to take advantage of outdated terms. Then, in October 2011, things came to a head. The estate of Rick Nelson, through the Rick Nelson Company Incas, filed a major lawsuit against Capitol Records. They claimed that Capitol had been holding back huge amounts of money that actually belonged to Nelson's estate. The lawsuit accused the label of underreporting royalties and hiding earnings, specifically a mysterious pile of revenue known as unmatched income. Unmatched income is basically money the record company earns from music, but says it doesn't know which artist it belongs to. In Nelson's case, the estate claimed Capitol was sitting on somewhere between $100 million and $250 million in these unmatched funds, money they believe should have gone to Ricky's estate. This lawsuit became a long fight, not just for money, but for justice. One of the key issues in the lawsuit against Capitol Records was about money earned from digital downloads and streaming, things that didn't even exist when Ricky Nelson first signed his music contracts. Back then, no one could have imagined how music would be sold and shared in the future. His old contracts just weren't built for the digital age, and that left big loopholes. After years of back and forth in court, that case was eventually settled. But that wasn't the end of the fight. In an even bigger win, Ricky Nelson's estate scored a huge victory in September 2020 when they reached a $12.7 million settlement with Sony Music Entertainment in a major class action lawsuit. The lawsuit, first filed in 2018, accused Sony of unfairly cutting down royalty payments from international streaming. How? By adding a sneaky intercompany charge before calculating how much to pay artists. In simple terms, Sony's global branches, companies they fully owned, were charging each other fees on Ricky's music. Then, after subtracting those made-up charges, they paid the artists much less. Ricky's estate said this was completely unfair and likely illegal, and they weren't the only ones affected. This case didn't just benefit Ricky Nelson's family. It helped hundreds, possibly even thousands of other artists who had signed similar old-school contracts. The $12.7 million became a shared fund for those artists who joined the class action suit. And even better, Sony agreed to change how they pay royalties moving forward. For qualifying songs, they promised to increase royalty payments on international streaming by 36%, a change expected to bring in millions more in the coming years. This legal victory sent shockwaves through the music industry. It exposed just how long record companies had been underpaying artists, especially ones who signed deals before streaming ever existed. The media quickly picked up on it. One report bluntly stated, "Everyone thought Ricky Nelson died broke until lawyers found proof that record labels had been stealing from him for decades." The final payouts were so large, they turned Ricky's children into millionaires. In fact, according to one insider, the judge couldn't believe the numbers. What started as a tragic end to a rock and roll legend turned into a powerful story of justice, legacy, and a long overdue payday that changed everything. What started as Ricky Nelson's personal fight for fairness turned into something much bigger. His estate helped uncover shady accounting practices, pushed record labels to update their royalty systems, and won money not just for his own family but for many other musicians too. Ricky Nelson's story became more than just a tale of tragedy or hidden wealth. Long after his final performance, Ricky made one more impact, helping change the game for generations of musicians to come. The legacy reimagined, a fortune unveiled. When Ricky Nelson died in a tragic plane crash in 1985, the world believed he had little left financially. Reports at the time put his net worth at just $500,000, a surprisingly small number for a star who had once topped the charts and performed to screaming fans across the country. His expensive divorce, flashy lifestyle, and the pressures of maintaining a career in a changing music industry only added to the public image of a once great star who had fallen on hard times. But that story turned out to be only part of the truth. Years later, massive legal victories by Ricky's estate would completely flip that narrative. The lawsuits against Capitol Records and Sony Music revealed that Ricky had been owed tens to hundreds of millions in royalties from music sales, downloads, and digital streaming that had never been properly paid out. While Ricky may have died with just $500,000 to his name, the hidden value of his music, his intellectual property, was worth far more. And once the legal battles were won, that fortune finally started to surface. To understand just how shocking this turnaround was, It helps to compare Ricky's numbers to other rock and roll legends. Elvis Presley died in 1977 with about $5 million in the bank. Buddy Holly died in 1959 with an estate worth between $60,000 and $100,000. Though his music later made millions. Chuck Berry, who passed away in 2017, had a net worth of about $10 million, and Jerry Lee Lewis, who died in 2022, was reportedly worth between $10 and $15 million, despite going bankrupt back in the 80s. Compared to these figures, Ricky Nelson's reported $500,000 seemed low, until the lawsuits changed everything. With royalty payments flowing in from digital sales, global streaming platforms, and legal wins, his estate's long-term value may now rival or even surpass some of his peers. Ricky's old recordings, made decades ago, are still making money today. That's the power of owning music rights. And the biggest winners are his children. While Ricky's will left out one son, Eric Crew, whose paternity was disputed, his other 4 children inherited not just memories, but a multi-million-dollar legacy. Thanks to the lawsuits, they didn't just get a payout, they became millionaires. His estate's victories gave his kids financial stability and opportunities that will likely impact future generations. Ricky Nelson's music continues to live on and earn money through technologies he never imagined. Streaming platforms, downloads, and global music sharing all helped unlock a fortune that had been buried in legal and contractual confusion for years. And while he may have been seen as a fallen star in 1985, history now tells a different story, one of hidden wealth, hard-won justice, and a legacy that reached far beyond the stage. Ricky Nelson didn't just leave behind a musical legacy, he left behind a blueprint for protecting artist rights in a digital world. Ricky Nelson's story began in tragedy, but it didn't end there. What many believed was the tale of a fallen star turned out to be something far more impactful. A fight for fairness, a lesson in legacy, and a turning point in the way the music industry handles artist compensation. His estate's long legal journey revealed a hidden fortune buried beneath outdated contracts and industry loopholes. More than just a windfall for his family, the outcome sparked meaningful change, setting a precedent for how artists, especially those from past eras, can still earn from their work in a digital world. At its heart, this story is about more than fame or fortune. It's about how intellectual property, when protected and pursued with persistence, can create lasting value. Ricky Nelson may have left the stage too soon, but his influence didn't fade. His voice lives on, not just in his music, but in the legal victories that now help protect the earnings of countless other artists. In the end, his legacy hit a high note, one that still echoes across the music world. Did you ever imagine Ricky Nelson's music was still making millions decades after his death? What surprised you most about Ricky Nelson's hidden fortune? Did his legacy become more powerful after his death? What are your thoughts? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.